You know, when it comes to having some sort of options in the diplomatic toolkit, now this is a very old relationship that we've invested in over the past 2 decades, Mr. Tharoor. Is it really possible for India to let this relationship go down as a result of a trade deal going sour?
But listen, Parikshit, it's not us who've done this, right? I mean, the entire sourness in the relationship has come from the extremely insulting language of a highly transactional negotiator. Now, if this had been conducted differently, it might have been a different story. But the way in which this thing has been done, the way in which the gentleman has spoken of us, a sovereign, self-respecting country, becomes very difficult for any Indian political leadership to swallow, number one. Number two, you can't have a relationship which one side values more than the other does. If America values us so little that they're prepared to throw us overboard so quickly over relatively trivial amounts for an economy the size of America's, then I'm afraid we may have been wrong in assuming our relationship was that important to them. Whereas previous American presidents have made it very clear that they valued India in India's own right as a significant presence in this part of the world, as an alternative pole to the Chinese, as a democratic ally with shared interests, no particular strategic lack of convergence, a population, I think almost 4 million Americans are of Indian descent. We had so much in common, and of course the shared values rhetoric as well. All of that kept us going as partners. Now, if all of this can be tossed aside with this kind of somewhat demeaning and belittling language by the American president, then we do also have to ask ourselves, what was all this worth? I'm still hoping that it's purely just a negotiating tactic and that the real work that's happening between the actual professionals, the negotiators from our Commerce Ministry, the negotiators from the American Trade Negotiators Office, that they are talking in a much more practical and constructive way, and they're getting things moving. And Mr. Trump's rhetoric was just sort of the accompanying soundtrack in order to put some pressure on the negotiation. That could well be it. Mr. Trump is fairly famous for having a very idiosyncratic negotiating style. And I think it may just be that. Let's not overreact. I'm always in favor of keeping a fairly cool head on these matters. But come 27th of August, if we are at 50%, let me be very clear, the bottom is going to drop out of a lot of our exports in the American market. No one is going to buy items from us at 50% tariff when even China is 30%. Our competitors like Vietnam, Indonesia, Pakistan and Bangladesh even are between 19 and 15%. Why would anyone buy anything from us at 50% premium? It's simply not. Even 25, the original tariff imposed upon us, puts the onus on us to somehow make up that 6 to 10% differential with our competitors. With 50%, we're out of the game. We're not even in the race. So we have to understand that in those circumstances, we have no choice but to look for other markets, to look for other outlets. And there will be creative things happening. I mean, I wouldn't be at all surprised if there aren't some smart Indians in the UK where we now have an arrangement with the FTA where 99% of our goods are going without any tariffs to the UK, who will figure out a way of importing all the things from India that America used to buy, repackaging them as made in UK and reshipping them to America for a tidy profit. Anything like that could happen. Who knows? But I mean, that's unfortunate for both Americans and Indians, but that seems to be where we might be heading if we don't manage to pull off a decent negotiation in the next 3 weeks.
Right. Mr. Tharoor, you spent a lot of time in the United States, in Washington, D.C., meeting think tanks, meeting members of the diaspora and the U.S. government. What do you think has gone wrong in the India-U.S. relationship? It's clearly not just about Russian oil.
Well, when I was there was no inkling of any such negativism. On the contrary, we found tremendous receptivity, tremendous support. I met, God knows, 50, 60 people, top influential people in Washington, not just think tanks and media, but also, frankly, a large number of senators and congressmen from both political parties, the Deputy Secretary of State and the entire establishment in the State Department, the kind of reception we got, and then Mr. Vice President Vance himself, totally positive, totally supportive, very keen on strengthening relations with India across the board, very keen on the success of the trade talks, very keen on cooperation in technology and artificial intelligence. I came back thinking this relationship was in great shape. So I am utterly stunned that the president seems so out of sync with what everybody else we met was conveying to us. It's true that I wasn't there to do trade negotiations. I was there to talk about Operation Sindoor and our political relationship. But the number of conversations I had, they couldn't all have been in the direction of positive relationship with India when the president apparently is alone on a completely different track. I don't get it.
Right. What do you think can be done now? If I ask you to put on the hat of a diplomat and someone who is a seasoned politician over decades, what can be done right now? Here you have a president who is trying to put pressure on Russia and wants India to stop purchase of Russian oil because he thinks that will hurt the Russian economy. What can India really do? How do we balance out trade relations and also a strategic partnership with Russia? Can we afford to cut off oil purchases from Russia altogether?
Look, that depends on market conditions. And if the differential is significant, we won't cut it off. I mean, we have every reason to look after the interests of Indians who need energy. I mean, it's as simple as that. We have said we'll always act in our national interest. If there is a continuing differential between the world market price that anybody else will sell oil to us and the price at which the Russians are selling to us, why shouldn't we buy Russian oil? I'm sorry to say, until and unless there are sort of United Nations approved global sanctions, we are not obliged to accept any country unilaterally dictating to us who we can and cannot buy from. The same, by the way, applies to the others. The Chinese are buying far more than us. If the Americans don't have the guts to sanction the Chinese but will sanction us, then I think we have to draw our conclusions from that. Look, our self-respect matters, Parikshit. After 200 years of colonialism, we are not a country that can be talked to this way, taken for granted or pushed around. We will stand up because we have convictions, and what is more, any Indian government would have stood up to this kind of pushing around. So I will say to you, I hope our negotiators go with courage and clarity, with a good sense of where we can make concessions. Remember, we made very sensible concessions in the first Trump term when he made this big fuss about Harley-Davidson motorbikes. It didn't hurt us at all. Instead of selling 83 Harley-Davidsons a year to India, they now sell about 280 or whatever. It didn't affect anything because the reduction of tariffs only affected a very small market and a very small elite segment of Indian consumers. There may be other items like that the Americans are making a fuss about, but we can give in because it will not hurt our market. But when it comes to something like, for example, dumping a large quantity of American agricultural grains, which, by the way, are heavily subsidized in America, on the Indian market at a time when 700 million Indian farmers and people living on the farms are dependent on agriculture for their survival, when farmers are committing suicide every year in many states of our country, that's unthinkable for any Indian government. We are not going to permit that to happen. We will have to have a red line. We are a democracy. We are accountable to our farmers. We are accountable to our voters. But as a democracy themselves, America should understand that. If our negotiators can explain why some things are not feasible and explain it convincingly enough, I would think that an American negotiator will go back to Mr. Trump and say, look, it's not possible. We can't get them to give in on this. Right. On the other hand, they gave in on that. That's how negotiations work. If we can do that kind of negotiating, Parikshit, I'm not at all, I wouldn't be entirely unhappy or entirely surprised if with some concessions, we come out with a win-win. But if we don't, if the Americans dig their heels and say, you will do exactly what we want, it's my way or the highway, then I think we should take the highway because the highway is open to us. We have plenty of other countries we can turn to, and we have plenty of other options on the horizon.
Make informed decisions with comprehensive analysis on the go.
Strengthen your portfolio with real-time market updates on the go. Create effective strategies with insightful expert opinions. on the go.
Grow on the go with CNBC-TV18, now streaming live 24/7 on YouTube.
Thank you for watching CNBC TV 18. For all our top stories and news updates, follow us on our social media platforms.